up as well, and then, you know, we will certainly finish out with having all of the folks be still available for us to, but thoughts, questions?
For our weather geologist or for anybody that's got the geophysics skill up there, Cascadia is forecast somewhere around 300, 340 years. Who's got an answer since it happened in 1700 when we can anticipate it again? What is the potential, what percentage could we apply to that?
I'm not sure about what percentage we can apply. Since the 1700 earthquake in Cascadia, we have already built up enough. The rocks have already bent themselves up enough that we could have another one right now. There's enough stored energy for that. But over the past 10,000 years, the return interval for earthquakes has been between 500 and 700 years. So we could have one now, or it could be another 400 years. But there's already enough built up for right now.
I think UW says on an annual basis, it's about 5% chance of an earthquake from all sources.
Right, yeah, so from all sources. There are other sources, certainly here on the west side. There are sources from local crustal faults, and then there's sources from deep beneath us that would be like the Nisqually or the Olympia earthquakes.
So the National Science Foundation funded the initial input of all these great instruments to do the measuring because they were research projects, et cetera. And now we're at the end of their life. What about the agencies that track those things, like the National Weather Service or NOAA, for the weather issues, or even them in conjunction with somebody else for the geological monitoring devices and whatnot?
So ideally, the organizations that should take this over would be something like the National Geodetic Survey or the USGS, but the funding for those agencies has been diminishing drastically, certainly over the last 20 years. And they just don't have the budget to actually continue to maintain something as large as this.
Currently,
Yeah. They would either have to have their budgets ramped up quite a bit in order to take this under control, or it would have to be, maybe it could be spread across different agencies. Basically the community, the geodetic community realizes that the rest of the country will really miss this data. The GPS data not only goes to just monitoring hazards, it actually is coupled into the weather. Every single one of these instruments measures the amount of water in the atmosphere from the surface to the entire sky above. It also measures the amount of electrons in the ionosphere, which I don't know if anyone saw. There was an article in Science only 2 weeks ago that there was an entire battle in Afghanistan that communications were cut off during this airlift of Marines, and it all was due to a storm in the ionosphere. And so these things can actually be monitored in places like the US where we have a density of instruments. So there are other places, just besides the shaking of the ground, we can do a lot of atmospheric physics. So there's room for cost sharing.
okay, so follow on. Currently, National Weather Service comes on dock whenever a ship comes in and downloads information for monitoring devices on the ships. That goes into that. Is that in their budget, or is that part of this NSF thing, or, because it goes then again to, I mean, we're talking about the weather is a huge factor in the global economy, whether people recognize it or not, because like you said, it can disrupt communications, you know, it can disrupt the supply. If you don't know what you're getting into and you send a ship into the Gulf of Alaska, it may not come back. So,
Right.
you know.
It's not, I don't believe any of that is funded by the National Science Foundation, no.
So we
Pretty
need to
much
talk to our representatives and get them asking questions, huh?
Yeah.
It's monitored through NOAA, the national NOAA, and then and the National Weather Service is within NOAA, and their funding is often very limited. It just I don't know if many of you have read or heard of Cliff Mass, who's a UW meteorologist and atmospheric scientist actually, who has petitioned a lot to try to get a radar, coastal radar, to have improved modeling and understanding of systems, but the radar would obviously benefit any type of coastal dynamic and helping with weather for navigation for ships and things like that. And it took him a really, really long time in order to get funds to get that coastal radar system, which is now in place. But he had to work as a very well-respected and well-known atmospheric scientists through UW in order to secure funds for that radar system.
There was a little motivation with a certain earthquake that happened that helped us get that funding, but it took that kind of a large-scale disaster to have people go, ooh, we need to have that radar because it could happen to us.
You know, I'm going to ask these guys to respond to more on the scientific side, because I think, I've just had to mention that we've worked together with the Cascadia Hazard Institute. We've mentioned National Science Foundation and things like that. These are the types of grants that come to universities, Research One universities, regional universities, and things like that. They're the types of things that our folks with some support write grants for. So, and a lot of times it's helpful, or a lot of times we're coming out to inquire with business, public institutions, things like that, to kind of generate some support for those types of things. So I don't know if you guys ever hear about this that much on an individual basis, but I would encourage you that if somebody from a university is in contact with you, find ways that you can help them, kind of have to pitch this, I think, in some ways these days, don't we, when we do these things?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, as an emergency manager, I approach all of these issues very holistically and include all members of the community in the conversation, because if we're not getting funding in one area, if the public can apply pressure to elected officials, if they're interested in it, that gets the attention of Congress or folks in the state. Do you see any opportunities for citizen-driven science in these areas? Because I feel like, one, it would help educate them on risk, and they'd have a better understanding of the hazards in their area, and two, it might support the resilience of some of the projects that you have, although it wouldn't duplicate or bring in funding. Is that something that is an option?
Yes, and citizen-driven science is actually something that, speaking of funding, National Science Foundation is very keen on, because it really does get people aware of the issues within their local region, and it helps them learn about the science instead of being kind of, afraid of what exactly science might mean. And so there are opportunities, definitely. I think, thinking in terms of mapping, I've actually had a number of teachers involved in some projects that I'm doing in the school district, and they get kids and the kids' families out to, take GPS, learn about GPS, take GPS units out into the field, and record data on different sites of where wildfire occurrence happened in central Washington. Obviously, that is one of our kind of major hazards that we're concerned with, is because of the number and the intensity of the fires that we've had lately. And so then they have this buy-in of kind of wanting to collect that data, and then seeing how their data can be put into it helps visually with mapping, because obviously taking the GPS points and putting it on a map and seeing their data represented spatially is a really, really big buy-in to get community support, and also to raise that awareness about, okay, what is happening within that area. So that's an excellent point that you raised, and it's something that I think at the university level, we really look forward to opportunities to partner with our private companies, public and civic organizations, as a way to get students, because ultimately, like was said this morning, the students are very highly interested and motivated in what is happening in the world around them, and then we learn kind of from them on ways that we can improve what we are training them to do, and by being that involved. And so I think that's a great point. The citizen science is a really, really big facet, and whether it's at a private level. So if you represent a private corporation, you're interested in getting involved with the schools or the science that's happening at universities, that is something that could definitely happen with networks between different organizations. So.
Other questions? Eric?
Insurance. I hold up this great promise that insurance, and should we be able to get the insurance industry to give discounts for, mitigation purposes, those types of things, that we could then influence those interested in the bottom line, that, okay, I can save money by doing something. Is there any hope for that type of movement that you see, or is, what we've seen is insurance running away from risk, whether it's earthquakes in California or hurricanes in in Florida, but I'm seeing the reward coming that will maybe help motivate individuals or ideally business to take proactive actions, get a discount.
That's a great question. From a purely rational economic perspective, it's, we're all wondering why hasn't the insurance industry already done so, right? Why aren't they taking the earthquake maps and, figuring out what the true cost of an earthquake to a house is, and then therefore adjusting their insurance rates to the homeowners on a variety of things? And the answer to that is that there's so many potential variables that might be impacting, for example, value of home or location of the business or any kind of business activity, that up until very recently we didn't have enough capacity to do that. That is where the big data comes in, right? The big new buzzword, right? Where these companies are going to be able to fully, kind of attach probabilities to various events occurring to each individual location or place that they're insuring, that it might actually happen. Now, some people are skeptical that the private sector is actually going to drive this through this advance of big data, and they still believe that it needs to come from the government. And if we see most of the successful insurance programs that exist in the United States today related to hazards, they're all government run, right? We talked about earlier today the earthquake authority in California that pretty much got put in place after the Loma Prieta earthquake, after all the insurance companies ran away, right? Then we have the pretty much FEMA programs for the flood insurance. They're mandated programs for anyone that lives in a particular flood zones and so on. And unless individuals are perfectly informed about what hazards are they facing, why should they be buying insurance? If I don't know that there is X probability of having an earthquake under my house, why should I go and buy insurance? And that's where this kind of part that you just discussed, where we have to inform the society about those risks, and not only just inform them, but have them understanding in a way that a scientist would understand is a really, really big part, and that's a tall order. And then there's other very potential benefits. Not only will these individuals demand more insurance potentially, but they will also demand mitigating policies and adaptation policies from their political representatives and so on. So I think that's our bottleneck right now, is that people that need to know this information about the hazards and so on don't know it. We all know it, right? But we're specialists in our various subfields, right? It is the homeowners, the business owners, the supply chain managers and so on, not the risk managers. They know everything. And if we can somehow figure out ways to, fortunately, usually through some kind of a legal way of doing that, inform these various groups, then something might work out.
Yeah. Do we have, we have our other panel that we're going to bring up, but one of the things I will share with you, it sends shivers up and down my spine as an emergency manager and responder, not having data available to look at and understand what's going to happen with weather or with other natural disasters, because we have been very successful over the last few years, much more so, because we could lean forward and pre-stage. We knew hurricanes were coming. We knew in advance. And so we do a lot better off when we can do that with protecting people and property, private as well as public. So understand what you guys do is very critical for all of us. And we would like to thank you for, and we'll
So this afternoon, this last panel is comprised of program coordinators. And I think it's really exciting. We have up here represented several different disciplines. We've got business, international business, supply chain management, transportation logistics field, and we also have Homeland Security, and we also have the administration of criminal justice. And so I'm going to start with Reagan Copeland, who's at the other end of our panel table. And essentially the question is how are you responding to the needs of industry and all these issues, and how are you going to develop that into some curriculum and educate our students to go out and work for these companies?
Well, thank you all for staying. I'm going first, and I'm going to be as brief as possible for two reasons. I actually have to be in Seattle by 3, so if I get up and leave, don't take it personally. And second, as a teacher, we know the signs of people who've been sitting and listening for a long time. And we've all commented that none of us are comfortable sitting down talking with a microphone. Very bizarre. So I run the International Business and Trade program at Highline, and we have created a new Bachelor of Applied Science degree in Global Trade and Logistics. And so in talking, I've been listening to all the conversations going on, and I would say that when we're looking at making sure that the needed educational and training is built into what we do and making sure that there is capacity, I would say the first thing that's important is that we provide as many pathways as possible into these educational programs. I think that workers can come from a variety of areas and not all go the traditional way. And so that's one of the things that we have been doing as a state, is trying to create as many pathways into that field as possible. My program has been lucky enough to work with Central Washington's program, and it's a great collaboration to really try to accommodate all student needs. That does create, again, more capacity at the top level graduate, more students graduating with skills in this industry. Second, we can't do what we do without you. We rely on industry. That's the only way that we can make sure that what we're teaching is what you need. The most formal way of that happening is our advisory committees. And I actually sat in, I think, for 20 minutes on the Supply Chain Institute at Central. They had their advisory committee meeting, and I sat in for 20 minutes and had like a page and a half of notes. There's no way that we know what you need unless you tell us. So having willing industry partners is key. And we're a service industry, and a lot of people think we serve students, which we do. But we serve employers, because they're the ones buying what we produce. And if we're not producing what they want, they're not going to buy from us, right? So if we're going to serve students, we have to serve employers. So really finding those connections becomes the life of what we do. I think the third thing that I jotted down is trying to figure out how we take what it is that you tell us. That's our job. You tell us what you need, and then we have to figure out, how do we put that into the curriculum? How do we teach it in a way so that the student coming out the other end gets what you want them to get? And that's a little harder. Do we offer a class? Is it about lean? Is it about sustainability? Is it about language? Is it about security? Any of those things. Do we need to offer a whole class? Well, as I'm listening to many of the speakers and talking about silos, if something like security it doesn't operate in a silo, then we probably shouldn't teach it that way. That it has to be integrated into everything we teach. So that's our job, is to then say, no, that doesn't work. We need to figure out how to get that aspect into everything we do within this particular program. I also think that we have to teach students how to think. And it's not enough to just write a bunch of stuff, have them memorize it, and then have them throw it out on a test. Because when it comes to things like, here's the stuff I was writing down when everyone was talking: analyze, identify problems, see outside the silos, predict possible outcomes, reflect on success and failure. None of that happens by memorizing. It all happens by teaching students how to think. And that is one of our challenges. I haven't saying we haven't, conquered it yet, but it's how do we teach them the material and also incorporate that quality that means that it doesn't matter what happens in the future, you have an employee who is able to think their way through the problem. So I would say that's kind of our role in all of this, and would be grateful for any collaboration with any employer who thinks that they might have something to share and thinks that the people that they have to choose from are not well prepared. The only way that we can prepare them better is for us to know what it is that you want, and then we figure out how to do it.
Thank you, Reagan, very much. We'll wish you happy trails on Interstate 5. And
It's a real logistics nightmare coming up.
yeah, thank you so much for.
Is it all right if I leave? Is
Yeah.
everyone
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Reagan.
It's
So-
nothing against them. They're
No.
wonderful people.
So next up is Jesse Cooley. He is from North Seattle Community College, and similar to Highline, where Highline's BAS degree is in trade and logistics, North Seattle has a new BAS. Actually, they were the first a year ago, and it's an international business. So I'm going to let you respond to the question, Jesse.
All right, thank you. So my name is Jesse Cooley, and I'm from North Seattle College. And I guess in listening to the different panels today and taking away points from that and relating it back to what we do as colleges and relating to the industry, I think that I would definitely, the first thing would be to echo what Reagan was saying in terms of creating the collaboration between industry and the schools. The degrees, especially a bachelor's degree at a community college, which is a new idea, is created based off of a need. And that need is in the market, the labor market, in terms of what industries are not having, are not represented enough, or not having enough students or graduates with bachelor degrees, and how do we satisfy that? So in creating these degrees and creating an international business degree at North, we're trying to satisfy something that we see reflected in information and data. And so when we create something, it's still relatively new, and working with industry is a way to continue to adapt that. It's not set in stone for us. And having those partnerships and having that collaboration with industry members is a way that we can continue to change it and continue to make it applicable to what's going on currently. We can try to wait for publications or new information, but if we're getting it directly from the source of people who are in that position or in that role in the different jobs, then this is what's going to allow us to better educate our students and let them graduate as professionals that are ready to enter the workforce. I think in complex subjects such as international business, we could have gone deep into any one of the categories, and we have a degree that's going to touch more on a broad range, but not as deep. And I think it's important that we also work to teach our students what they don't know, so that they know where to ask the questions if they're in a situation for a job, and they do not have to try to fabricate something themselves if they're not familiar with it. But there are people in their organization in different silos, as we've mentioned before, that they can go to for help, and they don't have to stay within their one area of specialty. And I think that, I guess I can leave it at that, but I think that as the product that we're looking to put out as a student or a graduate that is ready to enter the workforce, it's just especially necessary that we work with each individual sector of business, and especially working in supply chain to each one of the classes. As you can see how today, from the variety of topics, it touches so many of the subjects of international business, of business in general. You can talk about it in terms of management, in terms of logistics, in terms of cultural sensitivity, in terms of preparedness. Anything can factor into how that would tie into a total area or subject of supply chain management. And I think we have to continue to work together to prepare students to be ready for their jobs.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm going to have you hand the mic over to Abdul. Abdul is at Lake Washington Institute of Technology, and they too have a BAS degree. So we have 3 in the state now. But from my understanding, Abdul, it's focused on transportation and logistics. So we're looking at a little bit narrower focus than North, and I would classify Highline in between, and then we get to Lake Washington.
Yes, we have recently started a new program in transportation and logistics, and considering that the state of Washington is a leading in export business, and that has mainly been because of an integrated transportation system which we have. I mean, this is a unique state in the sense that we've got over 70 ports here and about more than 130 airports. And of course, we've got two large railroads passing through here, and of course, some natural gas pipelines as well, which are usually ignored. And so we've set up this new program in transportation and logistics. And the basic mission of the program is to produce students who are capable of taking up responsible positions in the industry, especially considering that the transportation system here in the state plays a very vital role in the export business. I mean, the state of Washington is one of the leading states in the United States as far as exports are concerned. So there was a great need for setting up a program which dealt with transportation and logistics. But now the program which we are set up, or in the process of setting up, is actually, it covers the various modes of transportation, including, of course, maritime and international logistics, air, rail, and urban transit. So we're trying to cover as many modes as we can. And obviously, the way we cover these courses is as it would be covered in a sort of a business school where we train students to become effective managers. And obviously, besides getting training in the transportation and logistics area, they also have to have a basic training in things like marketing, finance, MIS, and more so, as somebody said here, is we have to train them in critical thinking and effective decision making, because they are going to be the potential leaders of the future. And for that purpose, it is not only necessary for them to be trained in transportation and logistics, but to have a sort of a larger picture of things. And so what we try to do is to incorporate all those sort of elements in our curriculum. But however, since they have to go out and find jobs, it is very important that we do have a sound collaboration with the industry. And one way of doing that is that we have these advisory committees which can help us know what exactly do the industry need. And so we then try to incorporate their viewpoints in our curriculum and whatever else we do and in our mission. So that's very important. And also, from time to time, we do invite guest speakers and try to have an interaction with the industry just to get some feedback from them or to get some new ideas from them, because we don't know everything. Because the industry is moving or evolving so fast that we do have to keep in touch with them to know exactly what their needs are. Because unless we are able to meet the needs of the industry and the future employers of our students, then the credibility of our program it doesn't exist. So it is very important for us, and we realize that it is very important for us to work together with the industry, the transportation and the logistic industry, which is of course huge here in the state of Washington, and to come up with a curriculum which is in line with what the needs of what the present needs are and what is likely to be the needs in the coming years, and to produce actually future leaders in the area of transportation and logistics. That is what our goal is.
Thank you, Abdul. We're going to shift from supply chain management, international business, to the administration of justice. And we've got Steve Leddick, who is a colleague of mine here at Highline College. And Steve, it's all yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Leddick. I'm the program coordinator for the criminal justice program. And our question is kind of how do we embed KSAs and how do we support the resiliency in supply chain? Now, from our perspective, and as other panelists here have said, we have an advisory committee too, and we look to our customers to be able to tell us what they need. And they're very similar to supply chain and international business. insofar as that we are concentrating on some key areas that are embedded within the objectives and outcomes of our courses. And those key areas, at least from my perspective and the program's perspective, are what some people call the soft skills. The critical thinking is huge in the criminal justice world. Be able to solve problems, be able to look globally, be able to figure out how to work around all those barriers that are out there, and also have the confidence and autonomy to do so. I consult in different countries with law enforcement agencies, and you'd be surprised, you know, us as Americans, we have a lot of autonomy. You might not think so sometimes, but when somebody overseas or from a nation I just returned from says that you can't do it until somebody from way up the chain of command or doesn't have a global perspective, it doesn't get done. So for us to be able to work around those things and have the autonomy to do that and to teach critical thinking is huge, and have that problem solving. The other area we focus on that ties into resiliency is the emotional intelligence and communication aspect of things. If you can't regulate yourself to be able to solve that problem and drive forward, or to talk somebody else down and to reason with them so that you can solve the problem, then you're ineffective. In the law enforcement field, if you can't regulate people or regulate yourself first, you're going to talk yourself up or talk yourself into a bigger problem. And the communication is huge. We have lost the ability to communicate effectively because we have those cool smartphones and all that technology we just talked about. I just left the academy where I was the assistant director for a number of years. And we have people coming into law enforcement in the criminal justice system that would rather text you a disciplinary action than talk to you about it. Those are huge problems. And to be able to teach communication and how to talk, never mind the written word, now it's a whole other subject when you get on. Getting somebody to write something so that they're effective is another whole thing, which I'm sure we're all aware of. But communication is huge. And the last area that we really look at to tie into is the cultural intelligence. We really are a global village, and if you can't figure out how to relate to another culture or to research another culture to figure out why they're being so stubborn, because in that culture the chain of command is supreme, whereas here we can work around it, you've got to figure out how to deal with them so that you can get what you need to get done. Or to be able to not tread on those cultural things to where you make them angry before you even started because you didn't greet them or take the time to chat with them, because that's pleasantries mean something in those cultures, whereas here we're just going to get the business done and it doesn't matter. So cultural intelligence is another big thing that we focus on. And what we do is we try to make sure in all of our program classes that those things are interwoven all the way through the program so that they get repetition. If you have repetition, then hopefully when they, that muscle memory, that brain muscle memory, when they leave, then they'll do it without thinking. So that's kind of how we're doing it here at Highline.
Great. Now we're going to thank you, Steve. We're going to go to Bob Lord, who's Program Manager of Homeland Security and Emergency Management at Pierce College.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As she said, I've got the Homeland Security and Emergency Management, but I also have Fire Command Administration degree program, which is an interesting perspective because I'm right up front dealing with two different cultures and two different goals and two different attitudes. Now, I came in today, like many of you, all of you, with a lot of different background, varied background, but I walked in wearing the educator's hat. And specifically, as Steve said, really our question is how do we effectively take what you're saying, the employer, the industry, and embed that into those KSAs, into the educational process. From a very simplistic, obvious perspective, we're training your employees. We're preparing people to go into your workforce, and in many cases, we're preparing our replacements, right? There's decades and decades and decades of lessons learned and experience that we're looking and we're trying to capture on how we're going to convey that to this new generation of workers. And it really struck me thinking about this a little bit. Officially this weekend we became empty nesters. So I had to ask myself, did we leave our daughter with what she needed to move forward? to solve the problems that she had. And by design, Steve particularly expanded on the soft skills, which is an important part of it. But I do want to back up just a little bit, and in listening with it, and listening to what was being said, the good news for you is that I'm the last one to talk on the last panel of the day. So, but the challenge for me is to try to capture and say something different than what you've already heard. Or more specifically, if I can find kind of a sneaky way of telling you what you've already heard without making it sound that way. So the conversation that I've been most intrigued about today, and I think resonated the most, is this discussion of silos. And I do want to back up a little bit. I grew up through the fire service. I spent 35 years in the fire service. So if I took off my educator hat and put on my fire chief's hat, I will say, I know what that's like. I used to tell my FEMA friends that our day is over when they go to work. You know, we're back at the stations washing the truck when they're showing up to do what it is that they're going to do. It was a very siloed approach to it, and I think it was Peter Senge in the book, The Fifth Discipline, spoke about I am my position. And I'm sharing that with you because that's exactly what I felt then and there. I am my position, and if the only tool you have is a hammer, right, everything looks like a nail. So somewhere in there is part of that lesson that we want to bring back and embed through those soft skills our new students, our new replacements, our prodigy. We've got a lot of lessons that we've learned. We've lived the Osos, we lived the Hugos, we've learned Sandys, we've lived Sandy Hook, you know, we've lived all these different lives, and then how are we going to play it forward? That's our challenge. That's my educator hat back on. How are we going to have that forward-leaning? This is the challenge to you. How are we going to have that forward-leaning perspective to prepare them? And I want to share with you one of the things that I really like about my job is I get to meet with people coming into this field. And they're coming in with skill sets and experiences, and they're enthusiastic, and they've got perspectives, and they want to live this life. Many of them already have had careers, and they want to come into this life, this career life, and move forward. And I get to talk to them at that point, and I do want to share because I think it's significant. I found a few themes come up, and I've heard them a lot today. And one of the most common conversation we have is on the soft skills. That's been talked about a lot. The critical thinking. You've got to think. You've got to network. You've got to work with people. It's a very people-specific type of industry. The other point that I really like to impress them with is that in spite of their challenges, their own experiences, today's a new normal. We all know that, right? We know that because we live that. What they know is what they've learned through their various communication devices. So I like to keep that forward-leaning perspective by telling them that really don't get embedded in the challenges necessarily of today, because the careers that they are planning for, the OSOs that they're planning for, is a world that probably doesn't exist today. Many of you may or may not agree with me on that, but I never thought when I was a fire chief that I would be facing the kinds of challenges that I've seen since then as I grew up through emergency management. So we've got to keep that, and we need your help in helping us project and have that forward-leaning perspective of where these people need to be in 3 years and 5 years. In the fire service, we used to call that chasing the fire. You know, you can't chase the fire, you got to get ahead of it. And that's something we need from you. That's been brought out. We need from you on an understanding of where these people need to prepare to be when the time comes that they're there. Another common discussion that I found I've had with them is is that we want to leverage the interest and the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and attitudes and abilities, the skill sets that they already have. And I found that particularly in talking with the military veterans. I get to speak to a lot of military in transition. And almost invariably they say, Mr. Lord, what am I going to do when I get out of the service and go through your program? And invariably I ask the same question back. I found, well, what did you do in the military? What did you do in the service? What did you do in your civilian life? And they say, well, I was in logistics. Did you like logistics? Yes, you can do logistics. Did you like computers? Yes, you can do computers. And that's a second component of that, is we want to leverage their interests, prepare them to move into this new field with the kinds of skills and attitudes and interests and abilities that they already have. Okay? Through our programs, and I've heard it here already talked about, we're trying to press a whole community, a multidisciplinary type of approach. The common question is, again, what will I do? And I personally like using the analogy of, it's not like other kinds of occupations where you're going to get a certification. You're not going to get certified as an electrician and go to work as an electrician. You're going to find these jobs embedded in various other types of occupations and various other types of skills. Now, I think I said to you in this opening, I came with questions, and my intent was to listen, but some of these I'm putting back to you in the form of questions. And challenges. You need to help us, again, identify where they fit in that continuum. And one of the last common things that we talked about, and it came across here, is the discussion of resilience. Now, our particular question that Steve and I was asked is, how can we better support resilience in the supply chain? And through conversations today, I sort of restructure that as, how can we effectively embed the KSAs to better support resilience, regardless of the chain that's in there. And I heard, and finally to kind of wrap this up, I've heard a couple other things that really intrigued me. And one of them is when Gail was talking about faculty interaction. And that was another point that resonated. That was a little bit of an aha moment for me, because we've heard about transportation, supply chain, all these different kinds of specialty areas. And I'm proposing, I'm suggesting, I'm putting out there that if we really want this upcoming group of people to be successful, we've got to have a common educational base for them. We need to be on the same page when you're teaching them transportation, supply chain, and in our sense, we're more generalists. We are looking at a BAS degree program. We're working on that right now. And I see that as a critical component. I think we need to get our programs together. I don't know if the other programs are teaching the same kind of fundamentals and starting everyone off with a baseline understanding of Homeland Security and emergency management. Are we on the same page? Are we sending them down the same pathway right from the beginning? I think that's going to be a really important part of what we in the educational world needs to start addressing. That was another walk away from me. So the rest of it's been said, the multiple pathways, the willing industry leaders. I like the conversation about the apprenticeship programs and the internships, of getting people out there, networking, learning those kinds of skills, learning from you what we can't teach them or we can't instruct them. And to wrap it up, as I talked about being an empty nester, as we moved our daughter into an apartment, of literally having the conversation of, this is a time she needs to learn. You know, we've done what we can do, but now this is a point that she needs to grow. So somewhere in there, we as the educators need to meet the industry, and we need to do our job by bringing our programs together, and you need to do your job. That was a little stronger than I meant it to be. You need to do your job by helping us send them in the right direction. Thank you.
Bob, thank you so much. And do we have questions of the panel?
If I'm gonna sell an idea to my boss of bringing in an unpaid intern, what's it gonna look like? What are the requirements that you need if I'm gonna mentor, or if somebody's gonna mentor an intern? What's the time commitment? How long do we get them? You know, what's the usability of them, et cetera?
Well, that's a good question. The question is regarding the internship programs. And I'm going to give a quick generic answer, and Steve or one of the others may want to expand on it. We believe at Pierce, as I'm sure the others do, we're not just giving them a generic, you go out and find an internship. We want a monitored, supervised program. We establish learning objectives. They're not there to make your coffee. They're not there to make your file, do your filing. We establish learning objectives, and we monitor it through an interactive process with your supervisors. Part of the question that I think you meant also, Marvin, is what's in it for us? Meaning you, what's in it for us? And I think what's in it for us is a chance to receive your perspectives in emergency management. You've got enthusiastic people who are like sponges that want to learn, and they're coming in with new, fresh perspectives to start giving you that outlook, that perspective on what you should be doing.
Follow on to your comments. So, monitored progress, learning objectives. Are we talking an internship along the lines of a practicum, where it can be a course credit for a course period, and the learning objectives translate into a presentation, a paper, a series of papers,
Yeah, that's what we do.
mentor comments? things
There's
like
usually a contract, well, I'm sure everybody's got it. There's a contract where we're gonna lay that out, and we'll tell you, here's what we want, here's what you want, we all agree to it, and it's a quarter long usually, so that's 3
And
months.
a quarter is?
3 months.
Is
About
it
12
effectively
weeks.
12 weeks?
12 weeks, yeah.
Okay.
And it could be longer. I mean, within my program, I think the others too, we have 2 opportunities for internships. So that's 10 credits, which is 2 quarters. That's 6 months, or close to 6 months. So you can get back a project if you wanted it to be a paper, they wanted to have them learn something. It really is up to you guys, and basically it's a partnership between both of us. And the other thing to keep in mind too, as Bob mentioned, and others I'm sure feel the same way, we're not going to send you a problem child, because we're having a representative from our program come to you. So we try to screen them the best we can. Obviously, me being in law enforcement, I'd love to do a criminal history check and make sure they don't got warrants so that you're not worried about it. But I can't do that legally anymore anyway. Maybe get some of my friends to do it. But we're going to kind of assess their maturity and their, maybe their life skills, and maybe, what kind of skills they have. So we're not going to send you somebody that you're going to babysit. That's not what we want either. So.
Yeah, and I would add, I know at Highline it's 30 hours per credit, so students can sign up for typically between 2 and 5 credits per quarter, so 30 hours. And I don't know if that's at Pierce or at North or at Lake Washington.
Yeah, in ours it's 120 hours that they do, and it is part of a course. It does have a faculty mentor that's interacting with them. I wanted to extend a thought to, you were kind of quantifying it by saying this period of time or these many hours. One of the common themes that I did not specifically mention is we really strongly impress with all of these students that they need to get out there, they need to interact, they need to volunteer. Or as I like to say, the degree will get you the interview, but the muddy boots will get you the job, because that's what people are going to recognize. So I'm suggesting to you that you don't need to constrain yourself to simply within an internship program. That I know for a fact we got students that will love to come to your exercise. They'll help you in a white room. They'll help you plan. They'll do all this outside of the internship process, because they learn to recognize the value of doing that.
Because I'm looking at the spectrum, and depending on what the transportation requirements are and what's being taught, you know, there's opportunities for somebody to come in for 3 months and have a focus point that's gonna help with and reinforcing whatever's taught, and in all of the programs. And I'm just trying them in my mind, because, I mean, I'm gonna be working with Linda on the Homeland Security Emergency Management piece, but, you know, how do I sell this to my colleagues in the other companies? You know, how do I sell this to my bosses and their bosses, that this is, A, cheap labor, but like you said, it's not the coffee maker and whatnot, unless they're gracious enough to do that. But, you know, I mean, how do we sell that to them, you know, and match it up so that it meets their needs as well as ours?
I think it's a little bit more than that, cheap labor in the sense that, that they could be your potential employee.
Sure.
And so,
Training process.
absolutely. So on the one hand, we do give them the college credit for that, and there is also built in a flexibility. So if you wish to have somebody for a longer duration, say for the entire summer, you could do that, and in that case, we give them more credits, because we have in the curriculum the flexibility, for example, for 2 classes. So if somebody wants to do that, absolutely. And we are open to that. And it is really basically what we want to do is to combine theoretical knowledge with the practical knowledge, so that to get a feel of what exactly is going on, because what we cover in the classroom is very different from what you really are doing. So we find that it is absolutely necessary for a student to go and be exposed to what the real world is, and also to be able to communicate, or to develop interpersonal skills, which they can do while they're with you. And that can be helpful for not only you, but also for the individual, and in a way for us too. So there is a lot of flexibility in terms of the duration, and they do get college credits for doing that. And of course, what we do is we do it in a way that we require certain report. For example, in our case, we require a report at the end of the internship, and which has to be approved by the supervisor, whoever it is. Or it can be in the form of a presentation, whatever is appropriate. But it is very important that it is a collaborative effort. And so what we design has to be approved by you, so we work together with you.
I think, Carla, did you have a question?
I just want to comment on that too. A couple of things. You know, I mean this in the nicest possible way. I hope some of you have an opportunity to pay students for internships. Certainly our first opportunity, because quite frankly, these kids are paying a lot for their own school, for one thing. That puts a certain value on what they do. Now, it sounds like we're kind of the same thing. You know, our objective and our desire a lot of times is we want them doing the project. We don't want them making copy and just shuffling files and stuff like that. So sometimes that comes in the agreement ahead of time. And I think from a standpoint of how you could sell it internally, is I suspect all these gentlemen in the various schools probably have some examples of internships and outcomes that they can provide that basically would say, you know, this is what this organization got out of this when this individual came in. And finally, and it's done differently at various different schools, but a lot of times it may not be them finding a student. It might be you saying, you know, I'd like to come in and interview a couple of students to see if we can find somebody that would be a good fit for us for an internship.
Mike, thank you, Carla. Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. Do you guys ever set up a recurring relationship with employers? So to put some substance to that, I graduated from Northeastern University in Boston, where it's a co-op school. A bachelor's degree takes 5 years, but you spend 6 months of each year in a job within your designated field. Much like you're saying, college credit was given, you were expected to show a capstone presentation. But the way it was sold better was, at the tail end of my 6-month internship, there was another intern waiting in the waiting room. So annually, as an employer, I benefited from a perpetual presence. So that's an actual position in my headcount, and it's a revenue-generating position. These were paid internships, but these were for companies like Gillette, Procter & Gamble. We brought in Fortune 500 companies because we were promising, as a university, to backfill each position. And then what you found was somebody would do a co-op 6-month period. They'd do their first one with a company, then they get hired back to the second internship with the same company, they graduate and they're hired by said company. And it was just a 6-month to a year screening process. But as a suggestion, I would say that a recurring relationship where each intern is backfilled, that gives a company forecasting ability, that gives a company ability to leverage with their bosses internally that you have a revenue generating asset as well as you're contributing to your own field.
I think I agree with you, sorry. I think I agree with you that we can have a formalized cooperative agreement sort of thing, that does exist. On the other hand, what happens is in the due course or de facto, we develop that kind of a relationship. So once we have 1 or 2 students going to a particular industry or a particular company to do internship, then we develop that kind of a relationship. And then it goes on and on a continuous basis. But it is not as formalized as what you're talking about, because some places, they do have that cooperative program where 6 months or so are spent working with a particular company or so, and then they can do it after maybe 1 or 2 semesters to do the same thing, which in many ways is very, very useful. I agree with you.
I think there was a question in the back.
Yeah, I'd like to build on what Mark said, because that's how I got my degree in engineering. Was a cooperative study program, was very competitive, very, very difficultly sourced out, but there was many engineering companies in the city of Chicago that gave these out. Once you wanted, you were tied to that company as long as you wanted to be with them. You went to school for 6 months, you worked for 6 months, went to school for 6 months. Took me 5.5 years to get my degree. However, when I was going to school, they were paying for my education. When I was working for them, they were paying me a nice little salary. And I never did any file work. They always kept me into the engineering curriculum. So there's a lot of good points in the fact that corporations have a lot of money, frankly. And they have a lot of money to tie real quality people in on a competitive basis where you're not just going to get somebody that says, well, I'm going to be your intern, and then you're going to get screwed over because they're going to put you in a position where you're really going to be used as a hay boy, and you're going to be filing, you're going to be doing things that aren't really what the university sent you there for. So there's more than one way to make this happen, and you end up with some really, really quality people at the other end of the funnel, and that's where I ended up, and I think that's a good quality program you should be considering here.
I think that's a very good idea, and we'll certainly try to incorporate it in our curriculum. We'll talk to our advisory committee, because that consists of folks, managers from the industry, and try to work out some sort of an arrangement and see if we'll discuss it in-house, and then we can talk it to the advisory committee. But that's an excellent idea, because many schools do that, we know. Thank you.
Anything else? At this time, I'd like to thank the final panel for your contributions and for the great interaction at this hour of the day. You guys are amazing. Yes.
I have one more comment to make is, I hear about the interplay that we should be having with our legislators. I've heard a lot of things today. I'm very impressed with the panel. I'm very impressed with the discussion that went on. However, I don't see any legislators in the room. I don't know how many were invited. And then we talk about having a good relationship with the police force, let's say. In this community or in any community that you invited people, we're so close to Seattle. I don't know why you couldn't have the chief of police, the city of Seattle, sitting in this room, listening to what we're saying, and talk about one more level of security. Now, he may not be talking about cybersecurity, but he's going to learn something here that I would guarantee he does not know. You could have the fire chief of any one of these communities sitting here amongst us, and then we would learn more about preparedness. I mean, there's so much that we could gain from them, and I think you get more quality questions to the people that are sitting up in the front of the room if we had people here to ask those questions.
Well, your points are very well taken, and I was going to just say a couple of things before we all finish today. One is to thank my co-sponsor, Linda Carrar at Pierce College, for really her vision of what today would look like. And knowing Linda as I do, I suspect that she's already working on the next one, and we'll probably proceed and look at the evaluations, which we'd love to have you fill out, and we'll take your considerations and suggestions very seriously, and we're going to do this again. I think it truly, as I saw this come into focus as we were planning it, I too saw the silos, but I think that there's evidence today that we've begun to sort of chip away at those silos, and I'm really excited about it, and share also some of the light bulbs and some of the reflections that Bob has mentioned, and we see some running